Holy cow. I cannot wait for you to hear this story from my new friend David Jones. If you know anything about the hurricane and the dad who walked overnight to his daughter's wedding, this is the guy. He shares his story. He shares some incredible details about the story that I've not heard anywhere, but also some incredible nuggets that he's learned about himself, learned about being a dad, and some challenges and some encouragement that he's able to give us as parents. Here's my new friend, David. Welcome to the Family Table. I'm Matthew Eford. Join me as I speak with parents, caregivers, and family experts about the joys and challenges of family life. We'll share the stories, advice, and insights that will help you build a loving and resilient family. Pull up a chair and join us at the Family Table. Welcome, everybody, to the Family Table. I'm your host, Matthew Eford, and I have my new friend here with me, David Jones. I'm so excited for David to pull up a seat at the table and to share about his family and to share about some of his experiences. You may have seen him on some popular shows recently, sharing about an experience he had over Hurricane Helene. But before we get there, David, if you introduce yourself, tell the people who may not know you about yourself and really your family and the role that you play within your family.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Matthew. I really am a fan of what you guys are doing here with your show.
Thank you.
And so I want to encourage you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep encouraging families to be the best they can be. And as we get to later to my story, you'll see it is all about family.
Yeah.
I'm the father of three daughters, and I have a second marriage. I have a bonus daughter
Okay.
and her husband and two grandchildren.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a third generation engineer. My daughter Elizabeth, who we'll talk about later, is a fourth generation engineer.
Okay.
And I also have Ava, who is she's in event security. She's actually down in New Orleans now, helping getting ready for the Super Bowl. And for those
Wow.
of you listening later, New Orleans just got a record snowfall, so it was once in a lifetime kind of
Yeah.
event down there. Crazy that they're having that much snow that far south. And Susan is about to get married later this summer, and she's a graphic designer in Louisville.
I love that.
So successful daughters. My bonus daughter Danielle is a very successful marketing person. In fact, she works with me to help me with my marketing. So
Fantastic. Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
So talk to us about your family growing up with your daughters and now your bonus daughter. Tell me about some family traditions, memories that you loved that you had as a family.
One of the biggest family traditions we have, and we continue to this day, this goes way back to my father's father. So back into the 1960s, we would gather in Indiana on Memorial Day weekend, and
Wow.
those who wanted to would go to the Indy 500. And so we have this tradition going way back then that anybody in the family that wants to, cousins, extended family, friends, now spouses and children and grandchildren, um, come to Central Indiana on Memorial Day weekend, and we'll have a great reunion. And some of us will go to the race and enjoy that. That's sort of like the excuse for getting together,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
focal point. And and it's a tradition that continues to this day, and I don't see it ending anytime soon.
I love that. That's so fun. And I love the fact that it's an annual thing and folks can come to it if they have stuff going on. Obviously they don't have to, but it's just a way for families to get together. And I love that and the stories and the memories that are made there. And it's so cool that's been going on for so long. So and I love that you're keeping up that tradition. So
Yeah,
talk to us. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, tying it to a holiday kind of helps make it happen. Otherwise, people's calendars get in the way, and we can't do it this weekend, we can't do it that weekend. Nope, here it is every year. You know when it is. Just look at your calendar, and if you can make it, make it. May's a busy month,
Yeah.
graduations and,
Oh
and
yeah.
things like that.
But I love
Um,
that.
yeah.
And I love the idea of tying it to a holiday. It happens every year. So I think that's
hmm
fantastic. So talk to us about, as a dad, what's been probably what you consider the most rewarding aspect for you raising a family?
Oh, absolutely would be seeing my daughters become successful in their lives.
Okay.
As parents, it's our job to prepare them for the world to set them up for success. It's kind of like what I teach in my business. I do management and business excellence coaching and
Yeah.
consulting.
Okay.
And part of that is setting your team up for success. As a leader, that's your responsibility. And as a parent, it's the same responsibility that we're going to set them up for success. They're going to be children for a little while, they're going to be adults for a long time. So
Yeah,
let's
that's a
make
fantastic
sure,
point.
yeah, let's make sure they're ready for it. They're fully set. And by the grace of God, they're all successful. They're
I
all
love
doing
that.
very well in their fields.
So what advice would you have to a parent of young kids that they're trying to teach their children responsibility, about being successful, about taking ownership, the things that you just mentioned? What advice would you have to parents out there that are saying, "Hey, yes, I want that to be my kids. I want to be able to look 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road." I love that perspective of their kids for a short time, their adults for a long time. So give us some advice to keep us in that mentality.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is I never wanted to do something for my kids that they could do for themselves. Even if it was easier for me to do it or would
Okay.
create less of a mess, it's going to be, in the short term harder, but in the long term better for everybody. So never wanted to do anything for them that they could do for themselves.
Okay. So can you give me an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, like clearing your own dishes after dinner,
Okay.
uh, you know,
Yeah.
bringing them up to the sink, keeping your room clean, um, executing chores, and we didn't have tons of, it wasn't like
Sure.
they had a long to-do list, but when they're asked, they were expected to take care of that. So that leads into the other part is to really have high expectations for them. And we see so many people in business and in life that are afraid to hold their loved ones or their coworkers to high expectations
Okay.
for fear that they're going to have a difficult discussion. In the business world, they're afraid they're going to lose people, hold them high expectations. But actually, if you care for someone, you will want the best for them. And so you have to expect the best from them.
I
That's the
love that.
high expectation.
Yeah, I love that. I love that perspective. So David, I want to get into this amazing story, right? I love to get into the perspective of families overcoming a challenge, what they did, what they learned. So for those who may not know, please share this amazing story about you and your daughter.
So my wife and I moved to Boiling Springs, South Carolina from Johnson City, Tennessee. We moved over the summer, the end of July. We closed. And the idea was to get closer to her daughter and kids and to move her mother in with us, which we have done. So
Okay.
we're, in that stage of life. And um, my daughter, Elizabeth, my oldest, was getting married September 28th. It's a Saturday. And so Debbie, my wife, and I were planning to drive up on the Friday before, go to the wedding. I'm the dad, so my duties are show up,
Sure.
walk her down the aisle. Not a lot of planning and preparation. That's the mom and the bride and all that. So we're showing up Friday, wedding on Saturday. There was another ceremony on Sunday, and then back home to South Carolina. That was the plan. However, there was a wedding crasher. Her name was Helene.
And
And
for those who may not know, he's talking of Hurricane Helene. So,
yes, Hurricane Helene came through that Friday that we were planning to travel. So we rode out the hurricane here in South Carolina. Came through here,
okay.
and it came through here and then went on up through East Tennessee. And the distance from Boiling Springs to Johnson City is only about 2 hours. It's
Okay.
124 miles. It's all
Okay.
interstate. And so we rode out the storm here, got the yard kind of cleaned up. It was mostly just down branches and leaves. It wasn't anything major, no trees down or anything
Okay.
like that in our yard. In the neighborhood, there were some, but it wasn't horrific. But by the time hurricanes get this far inland, they're pretty much worn out.
Sure.
They've dissipated, and I've seen it many times before. I lived in East Tennessee for 40 years. I've seen it many times before where it's a couple of days of low clouds and rain, and then you're
Sure.
done.
It's done. Yeah.
Yeah. So the storm came through, got the yard cleaned up a little bit, got a generator going for my, because power was out, internet was out, cable was out,
Okay.
cell phone service was out. So I got a generator going for my wife and her mother. And the new plan then was for me to go on ahead, and if the roads are clear, to just let her know, and Debbie will come up on Saturday for the wedding and then come back and make sure her mom is taken care of the whole time. So I started out on what should have been a 2 hour drive, 7 hours into it after multiple
Wow.
detours and stops and just, delays. Um, and it was then, gosh, 1:32 in the morning. I came to literally the end of the road. Exit 43. I'll always remember this. Exit 43. It was the Temple Hill Road exit in East Tennessee.
Okay.
And the state troopers had the exit blocked. Everybody had to get off there. And there was a group of them meeting at the bottom of the ramp, group of state troopers. They had their cars and their blue lights going, and they were in a circle. And so I just went down and joined the circle. And of course, this was sort of one of those, which thing doesn't belong here? They all are like looking at me and said, "Sir, can we help you?" And I said, "Well, trying to get to Johnson City." And they said, "Well, the interstate's closed." And I said, "Well, you know, is there any way we can just go on down the road?" Because that's what I had done for the last 7 hours. I had
Sure.
been weaving in and out of traffic and going around down trees and over down power lines and all that. I'm thinking there's just a little bit more of this. Why don't you just, pull the barrier
Sure.
aside
Yeah.
and let me
Sure.
go on through? And he says, "Sir, you don't understand. The bridges are gone." And I'm still thinking, how does a bridge get gone?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where does it go? And he says they're washed out. Nobody can get through. You can't get through. I say, "Oh my gosh." So then I asked about the back roads. I said, "What about the back roads?" And he said, "No, they're washed out too. There's a lot of damage. We really don't know the full extent. We're not letting anybody drive on the back roads, at least until morning when we've got daylight and we can do a better assessment. The best thing you can do is go back to your car." And I said, "Well, sir, my daughter's getting married at 11 o'clock in Johnson City, and I'm going to be there to walk her down the aisle."
Wow.
And he said, "I'm sorry. I understand your plight and your position, but really, the best thing you can do is just wait it out in your car. Maybe in the morning we can have a road opened up and let you on through." Well, I couldn't hang my hopes on a maybe. So I said, "What about walking? Can anybody get by and walk?" He said, "Sir, please just go back to your car."
And how many miles is this? So you're at exit 34. How many miles do you still have to go?
Yeah, so I lived in the area for 40 years. So I had a good idea that it was between 20 and 30 miles
Wow.
from where I was to where I needed to go. And I'm 64 years old, but I'm in pretty good shape. I've run 10 marathons in my life. At the
Okay.
time I was doing 50 push-ups a day. I mean, not world class, but I'm doing okay. And so the distance didn't scare me. The purpose really drove
Sure. Yeah.
the the grit that was needed. I mean, obviously, I have passion for my family. I've got this mission, this vision of walking her down the aisle,
Yeah.
and the mission is to get to the church on time.
Yeah.
So the police then got back in their cars. They scattered. They went their separate ways to do their state trooper things. And I just went to the back of my car and grabbed my backpack and my shaving kit and a couple other things, put on a windbreaker and said, "I'm going." And there was a volunteer there who had a map on his phone, and he showed me if I could get on this road that was right there, right next to the exit. If I could get on that road and stay on it, I could get into the town of Irwin. And I knew the way from there. I
Okay.
knew how to get from Irwin to Johnson City.
Okay.
So off I went. All I had to light the way, this pitch black I'm a runner, so I started my running watch. It was 2:18 in the morning, and off I go. Dark as can be, quiet. It was eerie quiet because there's no traffic, there's no, nothing.
Sure.
And off I went. Got pretty far down the road, a few miles, several miles, and I came across sections of the road that were washed out. And now I'm beginning to see the extent of the destruction and the damage, and
Sure.
it still hasn't sunk in yet. With no cell phone, no internet, no, I mean, I had tried to call home several times, 10 times actually, I counted up. Tried to call home to let them know what was going on. I couldn't call ahead. It was, I had no idea what I was getting into. So I could pick my way through this debris, and then I came across a bulldozer and a backhoe, and they were clearing the road, and
Wow.
they were just pushing debris off to the side. The backhoe was scooping it up under that arm and spinning it around and dropping it off and coming back and scooping
Okay.
up some more and spinning around. And these guys are doing their thing almost like ballet. Um, and I got to get through here. And they're not expecting anybody.
Yeah, definitely not early in the morning. A
Yeah,
gentleman walking by himself. Yeah.
exactly. And so I got my little cell phone light and I'm trying to get the bulldozer's attention. And finally he's like, where did you come from? And I said, I'm trying to get through here, sir. Is there any way I can get through? He said, I don't think you can. The road is completely blocked. And I said, well, my daughter's getting married at 11 o'clock in Johnson City, and I want to be there to walk her down the aisle. He said, well, let me radio the other guy. And so the other guy stopped, the backhoe stopped, and I scooted on by him, kind of waved and thanked him. And I didn't get 20 yards past him, maybe 30, 40, 50 feet. And there was a debris field, Matthew, that completely blocked the road.
Wow.
And it was probably 6 or 7 feet. I was taller than me. And the backhoe's already started back up again. He's spinning around doing this thing, and every once in a while his light would, swing by, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on him. And I'm trying to find a way over this pile. I'm going to climb this pile, and I can't find it. I there it wasn't stable. There were, stuff sticking out. It
Sure.
was just not happening. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go around it. So I went around the left end, and there was just mud there. And I stepped in it, and it was like, you know, I'd been clean up until this point, moving along pretty fast, and starting to get a little muddy. And I thought, well, I can live with that. And the next step, it sort of went over my shoe. And the third step was the trend. And shoom, it was like quicksand.
Wow.
And I went down to my knee. My right knee's just sucked completely down to my knee in mud. And my left leg, I was trying to keep it out, and it was halfway down in. And I kind of fell back in a seated position, and I was stuck. I couldn't move. Now, I had been praying the whole time. Even when I started, I was, all right, Lord, you and me, let's go.
Yeah.
We're going to do this. And now I was pretty vocal with my hand raised. I need your help. And sure enough, I was able to get my right leg out, but my shoe got pulled off by the mud, and it was in the bottom of the mud. So I found a place to set my cell phone light, and I had a stick that I was using in case I needed for self-defense against any animals or anything. I tossed that. There's plenty of other sticks. And I start digging down in. I find my shoe. I get it out. I slowly am able to work one step at a time, one practically inch at a time till I got back up onto the road.
Wow.
And this backhoe is still spinning around. I mean, every time he spun around, I was down there.
Yeah. He's getting
This
closer and closer. Yeah.
He's going to finish that pile, and he's going to come for this one sooner or later. I mean, clearly that's what they're here to do is get get this stuff off the road. And he probably can't see me. So I had a huge sense of urgency at this point. I heaved my shoe over the pile to the other side. I just give it a big, huge toss. And I found a spot, Matthew, where I crawled under this
Wow.
pile. Actually, there was a big long tree trunk, and the branches were holding it up off the ground just enough. I crawled into this debris pile, and inside of it, I'm going up and
Wow.
down
Yeah.
and over and out the other side.
Wow.
Found my shoe, got the mud out, put it on, found a puddle, kind of danced around, washed the mud off a little bit, and headed on down the road. And I found the interstate. And one of the state troopers, I had actually been stopped twice, just on the walking portion up to this
Okay.
point by state troopers. One of them was very helpful. And he said, "Well, we could give you a ride back to your car." And I said, "No, I'm really, I'm gonna get to
I'm
Johnson
determined
City."
to get there. Yeah.
Exactly. And he said, "Well, if you can get down to the interstate, or down to the bottom of the hill, you can go up the interstate. You should be able to get there, because the interstate's closed, so it should be clear sailing." So the other state trooper that came along on that part was the one that told me to get back in the car. And he said, "So you decided to go anyway?" "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, you're on your own." I said, "Yes, sir. I'm not going to hold anybody accountable other than myself." So I headed down. I found that on ramp that I thought he was talking about. I went up the ramp, up onto the interstate, and I didn't get a quarter mile into it, and I came across one of the washed out bridges.
Wow.
And I was in the interstate was covered with debris, huge logs and trees and
Sure.
stuff from farms. And yeah, I mean, you've seen the photos, I'm sure. And standing at the edge of this almost abyss, and trying to see down in there, and there's no way I can get in and across or anything like
Sure.
that. So I head back, and they had told me there was um, one bridge left into town that was still standing, but they weren't sure how stable it was, so they weren't letting anybody across. And I thought, well, this is my only chance. So I went toward that bridge, backtracked down, went toward that bridge, and there were two state trooper cars parked there on the edge of the bridge, but they were out patrolling. They were out on foot,
Okay.
so I didn't have to ask for permission.
Yeah, just walk across. And so
Um, I,
what time? What time
oh
you
gosh,
started 250 219. So you're going at roughly what time is this? How long have you been traversing to get to this point?
this is probably 4:30 in the morning, maybe
Wow.
4:45.
Yeah. So
Uh,
still no daylight, still dark, still kind of crazy to be seeing somebody out walking.
yeah,
So continue. So the troopers are not there. You're just walking across potentially shaky bridge.
yeah. And heading into the town of Irwin.
Okay.
And now I didn't know this at the time, but I had passed all the debris and destruction. I had no idea what was in front of me, but I had passed it, and from then on, it was 20 miles or so, but it was just walking. It was
Okay.
just that's what's going to get me there. So I'm walking along, another state trooper pulls up, and he rolls down his window and he says, "Sir, are you the one that's trying to get to your daughter's wedding?"
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And I said, "Well, yes, sir, I am. How did you know?" And he said, "We're all talking about you." And I said, "Oh, goodness. Well, I hope it was good." And he said, "Yeah, they all said you were determined." And I said,
Yeah.
"Well, yes, I am. My daughter's getting married at 11 o'clock in Johnson City, and I'm going to be there to walk her down the aisle." He said, "Would you like a ride?" And I said, "Oh, I sure would. And if you weren't so ugly, I'd kiss you right now." And he said, "Get in the car, get in the back." So he gave me a ride into Irwin, which was only about a mile or two. He was going into the town hall there. They
Okay.
evidently had a temporary headquarters set
Sure.
up there. He dropped me off, and then back I went. Now I had a decision to make. I could go the interstate. It had fooled me once,
Sure.
or I could go the old highway. And I decided, I just had this push, this urge said, go the old highway, go the old highway.
Okay.
So I went the old highway. And
And you still don't know. I mean, there's no cell phone service, there's no
correct.
internet, there's no newspaper clippings. I mean, you're just completely going into this blind. You're choosing the old highway, and what do you come across as you go?
Well, a car came by, and this is a narrow two-lane backcountry road in East Tennessee, and there's no shoulders, there's no
Yeah,
sidewalk or anything like that. And this car comes zipping by, and I'm thinking, he doesn't see me. This is not good. I stepped off the side of the road once and got down in the mud. I don't need to step down and
sure.
step on a snake or step in a hole or something at this point. And right around that time, I saw one of those reflectors that people put out at the end of their
Oh
driveway,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like a 3 inch, 4 inch round red reflector on a long pole. And so I grabbed it. And if you're listening, if I got your reflector, my apologies. Please reach out. I'll replace it. But it worked. It worked. So um, about every half hour, every hour, a car went by. Just one car went by. And I said a little prayer. I said, Lord, I'm not expecting anybody to stop this day and age.
Sure.
Some kook got here
Yeah,
after a hurricane in the middle of the
yeah.
night, walking along,
Muddy. Yeah, walking by
uh,
himself. Yeah,
covered with mud. Yeah, exactly. But if anybody does stop, could you make it somebody that's safe to ride with? So I'm waving this reflector when this next car comes along, and I got my cell phone light. And sure enough, the car slows down and he kind of moves over to the middle of the road. He didn't stop, or she, whoever was in it, and went on by. So I knew it was working. I knew this reflector was working. And so that was my walking mode, was have this reflector out and have my light shining and just keep going on up the road. I'm keeping track of my pace. I'm looking at my watch. I'm starting to slow down a little bit. I'm getting a little tired.
okay,
Um, Starting to feel on the bottom of my right foot that if I don't do something, I'm going to have a blister there. That's going to
sure.
slow me down further. And I got about 8 miles from home, and this white pickup truck comes pulling out from a side road. He stopped and he let me by. And then he rolled his window down. He said, "Would you like a ride?"
Oh wow.
And that was like, all right, I hope we have an agreement here that if
Yeah,
somebody stops, they're good. And I said, yeah, I would actually. And so he said, well, jump on in. So I got in his truck. It was a white pickup, and we're going along, and he's starting to talk about engineering stuff. And I'm an engineer by training, and I worked there in East Tennessee as an engineer for Texas Instruments and Siemens.
okay,
And the words he's using are awfully familiar. And I'm trying to look at him in the dim light. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning at this point.
okay.
And I recognize his voice. He's a former coworker. I used to work with this guy
Wow,
20, 30 years ago.
wow.
And so I said, "Are you Steve Parfit?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm David Jones. We used to work together at TI." So then we had this little family reunion there, or work reunion, and he took me to my driveway, dropped me off. Um, well, I had no power. We had not sold our house in
Okay,
Johnson City. We still had
okay,
it. That was my
okay,
destination.
okay,
And I had a suit and shoes there that I could wear. They
okay.
weren't they weren't what I was planning, but they worked just fine. So all that worked in my favor. So went in, got washed up. I did not lay down. I did not want to fall asleep.
Sure. Yeah, because you're not getting up. At
Yeah,
least I wouldn't.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I am physically and emotionally drained at this point, and I still have a wedding to go to. So I get cleaned up, get dressed. I had an old car in the driveway. It's an old Ford Explorer that I use for hauling mulch and taking garbage to the dump and all that stuff. So fired it up, got to the church on time. Um, I had called my brother once enough cars went by, two or three cars went by. I thought, okay, somebody could come get me at this point.
Sure.
So I called my brother, left a message. It was about 5 in the morning. And it turns out that his cell phone service was out. He didn't get the message till much later in the day.
Okay.
But when I saw him there at the church, I had to be there at 10 o'clock for dad and daughter pictures.
Okay.
And he's a photographer, not the photographer for the wedding, but he's a photographer. So he was there early. And I told him the story. And I told my other two daughters the story. And I asked them not to tell Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not upset her or distract her thinking on her day. This is the bride's day. Keep the focus on her. We'll have plenty of time afterwards to tell her. And so we all just kind of kept this to ourselves. I I was worried before any of this happened that I wouldn't be able to keep it together walking her
Sure.
down the
Yeah,
aisle.
sure.
And now, it was even worse. I was just like, it's all I could do to hold it together. And but it was a beautiful ceremony, candlelight ceremony. There's no power in the church, but that,
Wow.
her sisters came through and beautiful ceremony. And then we went on to the reception, which was in a restaurant. It was an open restaurant. We had about half
Okay.
of it taken up, and they had power, and so there was no issue there. And Elizabeth and her husband Daniel had asked me to say a few words and say the blessing over the food before we ate. And so before I left the house to go, I had some words prepared. I knew what I was going to say. I stopped. I was almost in the car. I went back in and I grabbed that reflector and I brought it with me. So I brought that out at the reception and I told the story. And of course, as I'm telling it, I'm having a hard time because she's starting to tear up
Sure.
and people are boo-hooing in the wedding party. People in the restaurant were tearing up. And I presented them with the reflector. And I said, I'd like you, whenever each of you see this, to remember to always protect each other,
Yeah.
especially in your darkest hours, like this did for me, and to always continue to be a good reflection of God's love.
I love
And of
that.
course, tears,
Sure.
everybody, it's all. Um, but for me, I didn't realize at the time, but for me, what that brought was closure. Like, here you go. Here's the souvenir from the trip.
Yeah.
I made it. I'm done. I was here on time, did my dad thing. We're all together. And so, what could have been very tragic, and it was for many, many families,
Sure.
turned out to be just a real joyous weekend for our family.
Wow.
We're blessed. If I was going to look Elizabeth and her now husband, Daniel, in the eye and say, I did everything I could to get here on time. I had to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, I've got no integrity.
Yeah.
And that they wouldn't know any better. I mean, if state trooper said, go back to your car, I don't think
Sure.
anybody would have blamed me for going back to my car. But
Sure.
I knew at that point I hadn't done everything I could possibly do. So there's no way I could maintain integrity, no way I could live with myself.
Yeah.
Because truthfully, that would have been a lie to say I did everything I could when I hadn't done everything I could. So it was that value of integrity where your actions meet your words
Love that.
that helped drive the decision. The decision to walk was a no-brainer, and I love my car. I have a really cool car, right? It's a Ford Explorer Platinum Edition. It's got this twin turbo under the
Yeah. Yeah.
hood. I mean, it's just, awesome. It didn't take me a second to say I can leave it beside the road.
Yeah.
If it's here or not when I get back, fine. We got insurance,
Yeah.
we'll deal
Sure.
with that.
Yeah.
Um, so when you have that purpose out there, the decision making becomes really easy. Your focus becomes very clear. It's like, oh, that's it. I'm going there.
Yeah.
You know, if you can help me, help me. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
And so that's what it was about.
Well, that's an amazing story, and I appreciate you sharing it. But what I do love about it, and you mentioned this word so many times, is you were determined, right? As a
Yeah.
dad, you had a vision, you had a goal, and you said, "I'm going here." come hell or high water, I'm coming here. This is where I'm going. And I love that you led that way, right? As men specifically, I believe God calls us to lead our families. And we're called to lead in such a way that we're saying this is the direction that we're going. And we're going this direction. Come alongside me, come with me, but this is the direction that we're going. And I love that you did that. David,
Yep.
what an incredible story. So
Thank
talk to me about what have you learned about yourself during that
you. Mhm.
experience? What's
Mhm.
something that surprised you about yourself in those moments?
I realized that God is closer to us on a daily basis, on a minute by minute basis,
Yeah,
than I think we realize. He 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 was with me the whole time. Uh, with the exception of those few moments around the backhoe
sure.
where I really had a sense of urgency. And then there was one part where there was a pack of snarling, growling, barking dogs that
Okay.
I couldn't see, but they were
Okay.
very close to the road, and
Yeah.
I was a little concerned, but they evidently were behind a fence, couldn't get me. Those two moments, I had a real sense of urgency. Like I gotta get out of here. I gotta get past this. I gotta get going. I never had any panic. I never felt it was kind of interesting. I never really felt alone, but I knew I had to do the work.
Yeah.
Like
No, that's a
there's,
great perspective. Yeah.
you know, he's not gonna, God is not gonna, just pick me up and drop me down at home. I have to do the work. So it was that combination. So he really is with us in guiding us. And I'll give you an example. Um, all those delays that in the driving portion of this trip
Okay.
took me 7 hours to go, which should have been an hour and a half to get to that point. And I'm like, all right, what's next? What's next? What's next? I never let my guard down. It's just, all right, what do I have to overcome now? What do I have to keep doing? Where do, how am I going to get through this obstacle and get to the next? And I realized later that had I not had those delays, there still would have been water rushing over the
Yeah.
road.
It's a
I wouldn't have been
fantastic
able to
point.
get through.
Yeah.
And if I had gotten there and gotten stuck, I wouldn't have in the middle of the night, well, let me go try it now. You
Sure.
know, I would have missed the wedding or um, you know, found a way to reach them and we could have rescheduled or something. Uh, so he really is with us a lot.
I
The
love
other
that.
thing that's been really interesting is there's been three main groups of people that have either reached out to me or responded. This thing went around the world,
Okay.
and only God could have done that too. I
Amen.
mean, um, and the first group is women who have or had a good relationship with their dad.
Yeah. Cool.
They read the story and they're like, "Oh yeah, my dad would have done that for me. Oh yeah, I just love that." That sort of thing. Just uh, a well, a welling up of
Sure.
good emotions. Then there's the women who did not have that relationship or do not, and they're like, "I can't even get my dad to send me a text on my birthday."
Wow.
They have something, they have a gap. They have a hole somewhere in their heart or their soul.
Yeah.
There's something missing for them that kind of keeps them from feeling like they're complete. And then there's guys. And these are the guys that are like, way to go, dude. Man, like, love that you did that. You set the bar high for us, and I would have been there. I'd have done the same thing for myself. I just love it, and they're very brotherhood bro kind of stuff. And very supportive, very supportive.
That's really interesting. I love the way that the Bible talks a lot about love and how it moves us to action. And your love for your daughter moved you to action. I mean, it moved you to action, and I love that. And I can definitely see that in the groups of people that you said, like, right, your story is challenging to me as a man. It's challenging me to look at my boys and say, how am I going to show up for them today? How am I going to show up for them tomorrow? How am I going to overcome obstacles that are put in our way to show up for them? So
Mhm.
I got you. I'm totally there. But I can look at my wife, and she has a great relationship with her dad, thankfully. And I can see her hearing this story and being encouraged and being like, oh, it reminds me of my dad. But
Yeah,
we also have close friends that have very poor relationships with their dad, their earthly father. But what I would call us to remind us is that our heavenly Father loves us that way, right? That our heavenly Father loves us in such a way that He sent His Son on that kind of journey, sent His Son to us to show up for us. And so I love your story. So I do have a question though. Your other daughters, like, are you planning different journeys to make it to their wedding? Are you planning different ways, different locations for the wedding? Any changes in their future lives in that arena? You said you
yeah,
have another one coming up soon.
yeah. That was one of the revelations that came to mind while I was walking. It was like, oh no, I've got two more daughters that I haven't just been married. How am I going to top this? And yeah, so that's kind of been the joke, like don't get married in hurricane season or whatnot. But Susan is getting married in August,
Nice.
so we'll keep our fingers crossed. Supposedly, this was a 1 in 1,000 years
Yeah.
event,
Yeah.
so 2 years in a row would really be beating the odds. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. No, and it was more playful. But man,
Yes,
I appreciate you sharing. And as a dad, I appreciate that you showed up for your kids. I appreciate that you are elevating the expectation as it should be. That you're not slinking back and saying it's a hard thing, I just can't make it. You're saying no, I'm going to sacrifice of myself. I'm going to sacrifice my time, my energy, my effort, and I'm going to show up for my kids. And
absolutely.
I'm glad that we have dads out there. So, David, what kind of final message would you have to parents out there that are hearing your story? They're encouraged by your story. You pull it on their heartstrings. You challenge them. What's a final word that you would have for them?
Well, the first thing would be, just pretty much like what you said. It's only words until you put it into action. And the action is sort of the proof of the love.
Amen.
You know, that's there. The other thing is when I set out on that walk, and it ended up being about 17 miles of crawling and climbing and walking and 10 miles of rides in cars.
Okay.
When I set out on that, I really had three options in mind, three ways that I could win. The first was I'm going to get to the church on time and I'm going to be the one that walks my daughter down the aisle. That's, you know,
Yeah.
that's driving me because purpose plus passion drives performance.
I love that. Say that one more time for us.
Purpose plus passion drives performance. So you can have a purpose, but if you're really not, a vision to me, that vision of walking her down the aisle, something that I've thought about since she was born.
Yeah.
Um, you can have a purpose, but if you don't have passion for what you're doing, you're not going to go the extra mile. That grit is not going to show up. You can have passion, but not have purpose, then it's just like, blowing up a balloon and letting it go. You get all kinds of energy going all over the place.
Sure.
But when you have that direction, that destination, that purpose, and you put the passion behind it, that's when that grit comes out. So, um, what I had was that purpose and passion to get all the way. But if I couldn't get all the way, if it physically wasn't possible, maybe I could get far enough that some other option would open.
Yeah.
Or maybe I could get to cell phone service and I could call and let them know, hey, this is what's happening here. Maybe they could FaceTime me in and she could walk down the aisle with a cell phone. I don't know. But that would be the second way of winning. And the third way would be to get as far as I possibly can, can't get any farther. It's absolutely too dangerous. and I turn around and come back and I have some firsthand information that I could report back to the other people that were stranded and to the state troopers
Sure.
because they really, it was still the fog of war. They had no idea the extent of what was ahead. They just knew close the roads, don't let anybody out on them. So having those tiered goals that were aligned, right? It wasn't like, well, one's way over here
Sure.
and one's way
Yeah,
over here,
sure.
but these are aligned that I can uh, accomplish one after the other after the other. So when you're raising your kids, you can do the same. You can have multiple levels of goals and keep striving for that ultimate goal
I love
with
that.
the others leading you to it.
Yeah, I love that. What a fantastic perspective to have. And it all is valid if you move forward. Because if you, David, if you stay on your couch, you don't have this beautiful story. You just don't. You don't have this experience. You don't have this connection with your daughter, but you chose to make the hard decision to go, to drive, to go around obstacles, to get out, to fight the weather, to go through the darkness and to show up for your daughter. I absolutely love it. I'm so encouraged, I'm challenged, and I appreciate you sharing it with us today. David, if somebody's interested as maybe as a business leader, a business owner, just as a professional, and they say, "Hey, I love David. I love his perspective. I love the story, but I love more of what he's saying, and I want some more information about coaching, keynote speaking." How do they get in touch with you? Please don't share
Sure.
your cell phone number. I'm not expecting that, but just how does somebody get connected to David?
Yeah, so you can find me at theexcellenceadvisory.com. That's
Love
my
it.
website, theexcellenceadvisory.com. My email is djones@theexcellenceadvisory.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm David M. Jones, no periods or punctuation or spaces or anything in there, davidmjones.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can message me that way as well.
That's fantastic. Okay. Well, David, brother, again, I appreciate you. Appreciate the standard, the excellence that you're setting. I no one's perfect, but I'm so glad that you showed up in this story. Everybody, thank you for being a part of the family table. Thank you for pulling up a seat and sitting with us and hearing this amazing story. We will see you soon. Thank you for pulling up a chair at the family table. We hope today's conversation has strengthened the bonds that hold us together. Don't forget to follow the show to keep these heartwarming stories coming your way. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share it with friends and family. And if there's someone whose family story you think would be a perfect fit for the show, drop their name in the comments. We would love to hear from you and bring more families to the table. Until next time, cherish those moments with your loved ones.